Well, hello, everyone. My name is Eric Simon, and I am the manager for the Education and Programming Department here at the St. Joe County Public Library. And throughout the month of April, we've been hosting several programs focused on themes of our one book, One Michiana Common Read of Just Mercy. Just last week, we had Professor of Law and Director of the Exoneration Justice Clinic at Notre Dame, Jimmy Garule, join us for a great conversation about the work they do at the center there. And tonight, I'm excited to have several other folks from our law school at the University of Notre Dame joining us today. Vinnie Versagne, the Notre Dame Law School Director of Career Development, is here with us today. And a panel of law students and alumni will also be joining our conversation. So with this event, in the Just Mercy story, in 1983, Bryan Stevenson, as a 23-year-old law student, was starting an internship involving assisting inmates on Alabama's death row. And this led to Bryan founding the Equal Justice Initiative at a very young age, a nonprofit law office in Montgomery, dedicated to defending the poor, the incarcerated, and the wrongly condemned. So, I know when I read the book with my background in career services, I was just curious, like, how did Bryan, how did he get into what he did? What inspired him? What kept him moving during difficult times to serve the public in the way that he did in his early 20s and still does to this day? So I'm really excited to learn the stories, of Vinnie here and the rest of our panel to see what's inspired you to attend law school, and then what's inspiring you in your careers after. And so just excited to hear those stories. So Vinnie, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thanks, Eric. My name is Vinnie Versagne. I'm the Director of Career Development here at the law school, as Eric mentioned. And we have with us this evening a panel of students and alumni who are using their careers as lawyers to serve their community. And I want to get us started here by going around the horn and giving all of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell the group here what it is that you are going to be doing or that you are doing now in your career. Jessa, why don't you get us started?
Okay, so I'm a third-year law student at Notre Dame, and pretty much since my first year, I've been involved with the Exoneration Justice Clinic at Notre Dame Law School, and it's inspired me to continue doing wrongful conviction work following graduation. I'm honored to be one of Notre Dame's Bank of America Fellows, which means Notre Dame will be funding me for 2 years to work at a conviction integrity unit in Michigan. Essentially, this means it's a unit within a prosecutor's office, the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office, which reviews claims of innocence and also applications for expungement. So I will be screening those and assisting people when they qualify.
Kevin?
Thanks very much, Vinnie, and thanks, Eric, for hosting us tonight. My name is Kevin Murphy. I'm presently a staff attorney at the Notre Dame Exoneration Justice Clinic, where I've had the good fortune of working with Jessa on a regular basis. I started at the clinic last June after working for several years. Well, I'll start at the top, I guess. I am a Notre Dame Law School graduate in 2014. And after that, I clerked for a year and then went to a law firm in Chicago called Jenner and Block. And Jenner, among other things, was a great opportunity for me to pay off my loans while also getting a good pro bono experience. And I had the opportunity to work on some exciting criminal cases at Jenner and some wrongful conviction cases, and that really became a passion of mine. And I started, liking that work more and more, and the billable work a little bit less, and thought, hey, I wonder if there's a way I can do this work around the clock. And just about when I was wondering that, this opportunity presented itself last year at Notre Dame with the new clinic. And I've been working there for about 10 months now, and it's been a blast. We can get a little more into it later, but that's my spiel.
David?
Yes, hi, David Pruitt here. I'm the director of the Notre Dame Clinical Law Center, and thank you, Eric, again for having us on, and I hope this is helpful. So my background, I'm probably one of the local folks. I actually went to Buchanan High School, so relatively close by here, southwestern Michigan, and went to Notre Dame for undergrad and law school. And largely from there, my story kind of mirrors much of what Kevin just spoke about in terms of I started out my career at a law firm in Washington, D.C. After having gone through Notre Dame Law School. It was great. It was wonderful. But there was something kind of always wanting us to go home, having a family and kind of growing up in the community. I think it's a fabulous community. And so we've been here since 2003. I worked in a couple of different law firms when I moved back, but always kind of had this idea that kind of full circle, much like Jessa said, there's something more out there and something bigger than yourself. And about 5 years ago, the opportunity presented itself to move back to Notre Dame and head up the Clinical Law Center, which are several clinics that do work in the community. And it just, while I wasn't necessarily looking for the opportunity, it just kind of seemed like a dream job, and it's been great so far. And we can talk more about what we do, but yeah, it's been a wonderful opportunity for me, and I feel great every day, kind of going into work, which is a good thing. So.
Could each of you maybe share what it is that initially brought you to law school, and to the extent that kind of serving your community was a part of that thought process at the time, or maybe it wasn't? And we'll just keep going in the same order here unless someone wants to jump in first. So Jessa, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah, sure. So I had kind of just a weird career path. I went into my undergraduate education in the College of Engineering. And once I kind of realized that wasn't for me after my first year, I floated around a bit, but I ended up studying environmental policy. And when I was taking policy classes, I realized how important the law is. And I kind of decided if I could spend a whole summer sitting in a courtroom, then it would be worthwhile to pay for law school. And so I did a public defender internship. So that was my first introduction to criminal justice system in America. And I really had no clue how much that internship would impact me. But after that, I just continued to seek out opportunities to learn about the criminal justice system and reform it. So that's pretty much what inspired me to attend law school. I hope that's a good answer.
Yeah.
Vinnie, it's so long ago for me now, I can hardly remember. But from what I recall, sorry, I guess Dave's after me here. But from what I recall, I was a business student in undergrad. I actually thought I wanted to do finance and accounting. And then towards the latter half of my time at Indiana University in Bloomington, I started thinking, I wonder if there's something else. I wonder if there's a more clear opportunity for me to serve in some capacity. And I looked at a couple different options. And one thing that I'd always kind of had in the back of my head was that I loved the idea of being a courtroom lawyer. I loved lawyer movies. It was something that made me excited. As I started reading up more and more, it became clear to me that being in a courtroom isn't all or even most of what being a lawyer is, but that idea still attracted me. And so I applied to some law schools after digging into it a little more and ended up at Notre Dame. And actually at Notre Dame is kind of where I developed that passion I currently have for criminal defense and wrongful conviction work. I took a course called the Advanced Criminal Justice Externship. I don't think it's around anymore, but the gist of it was you would work with a local attorney, Stan Rubel, defending low-level felony cases in the South Bend area. And so I was handed 4 files and sent to county jail here in St. Joseph County and met with my first clients. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me. Just being in a jail or a prison, for those who haven't been there before, can be like a very, almost startling, but you feel very confining, and it immediately pushes you out of your comfort zone. And then you think, these are people that are spending their lives here, and my clients were charged with low-level offenses, but were facing, still a good chunk of time in prison. And it was a great opportunity for me to, and this is still what, I like most about my job right now, is being a voice for those who don't otherwise have a voice. And I think that's always been, for me, what's most driven me to this type of work. And I had some luck, some good luck, some bad luck, but one of my wins in that externship was getting our client his case dismissed on Christmas Eve, and he got out of jail in time for the holidays with his family. And at that point, I was like, I'm in. I love this work. Like, this is that was a really cool experience. And so even when I went into more business litigation for several years after law school, I always kind of kept that fire alive a little bit.
Yeah, okay, so we didn't trade notes beforehand, but much of what Kevin said kind of I'm gonna somewhat repeat, I think. So similar story, I think. For me, I'd say, I don't know where it came from initially. There's an old newspaper article when you're student of the week at the local newspaper, right? And I was student of the week, and it's what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's a lawyer. And so that's from like the 4th grade. I don't know where it came from because there were no lawyers in my family. I guess I just really like to argue and thought that would be a place to really take that to the next level. But from there, so the seeds were obviously planted, but being somewhat practical, went off to school and had family that really kind of stressed, well, you need to get a job, right? It's great to go to school, but you need to get a job. So kind of mirrored the Kevin path of business and finance. And I was a finance major undergrad. And dabbled in that a little bit after graduating from law school or from undergrad, but it didn't really kind of sort of spark a passion. Went back to law school, took the clinic that now I'm kind of working at several years later. And just really remember and was struck by having the opportunity to work with people, like Kevin said, that didn't have any other resources and needed lawyers to help them. And still, this is almost 25 years later, I kind of still remember the first hearing that you go to as a student, and kind of all the smells and the people and all of that is still with me. And went with Tom Schaefer, who was kind of a local legend who was at the law school for a very long time. And just, we did get a good result for our client who was getting evicted, and was able to kind of stave that off. And there was just something about the way that he carried himself, and the way that he would go into the courtroom and people would stand up, and not that lawyers are entitled to any type of deference, but I think it was just kind of the way he carried himself. And I said, wow, that's really great. That really the smartest person that I've ever met kind of had this ability and desire to work with people that needed the help. So even though I went off and did different things after graduation, continued to do pro bono work, worked on an asylum case when I was out in DC. And that was the most meaningful professional experience for me, being able to help somebody get asylum that really, frankly, might not have lived if she would have gone back to her country. So from there, once this opportunity came up, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was kind of full circle for me to finally get back full time to doing what I really wanted to do. So it's been great. And I don't regret the move back at all. So I'll just piggyback off Kevin's next answer for my next one as well, I'm sure. So
all of you, it sounds like, had experiences, though you took different paths to get there. Jesse, you're going right into public service, and Kevin and David, you had stints in private practice first, but it sounds like all of you had experience in law school that was really impactful, serving the community, that at least set the stage for what you're doing now. And all of you are right now involved in serving our communities through the clinics that the law school operates. Maybe you could each talk a little bit more about the particular work that you do, and what you find most rewarding about it.
Yeah, so as a member of the Exoneration Justice Clinic, I have a couple of clients who I'm on a team of other law students, and we work with the staff attorneys like Kevin to represent them. A big part of our work is essentially just going through all the complete file of a client has, I guess, from the notes of a prosecutor's office, the notes their original defense attorney took, the trial transcript, pretty much everything, and trying to figure out what went wrong in their case. And then through investigation, we can hopefully uncover new facts. And then we put all of this together into a post-conviction relief petition, which we file with the court. So I've had opportunities to do everything from screening clients to see if they actually do have like a valid claim of innocence to working on these actual briefs, which have been filed. So it's been a great process, I guess, to see a case go from the beginning stages all the way to the end. I kind of lost my train of thought with this question. But I guess seconding what Kevin said earlier, just being like a voice for the voiceless, being able to provide hope for clients, I think is the most rewarding part, because these cases do take so long, but just knowing that, having your client know that someone or like a whole team of students is out there fighting for their release, I think it's really important.
Yeah, well, I'll just piggyback off Jessa's answer there because that was so good. But I work at the clinic and work with Jessa and 10 other students at the moment on wrongful conviction cases, and that involves, yeah, like Jessa said, it kind of runs the gamut from reviewing trial transcripts to going out and talking to witnesses, to analyzing legal arguments, and ultimately putting together a petition for asking a court to set aside a conviction for our clients. It's a long process and doesn't have some of the benefits of, it's not like you're in court every day for a couple of years. Sometimes you're not even in court at all. And so it's a very, very much a long game. But I will second what Jessa said about the most rewarding parts are really being a source of hope for your client, being a voice for your client, and having those connections with your client when, you kind of have a moment when you both realize sometimes, there's very little that separates us, and, this is my, a human being like me with the same hopes and desires and loves and hates. And I think those are the moments that really make the work worth doing. And I know Jessa is going to see one of our clients in prison tomorrow morning, I think. And so, it's those kind of experiences that I think for me and for our students in particular can really be life-changing.
Definitely.
So just to finish up, so I've handled for the last 5 years, I've handled kind of the operations of several of our clinics at the law school. Economic justice is one that Professor Fox has been doing work in the local community. I know she's been very impactful in terms of what she's been able to do, really representing tenants in kind of landlord-tenant disputes. And I was in her first clinic class back in 1998. So it really is coming full circle here. And we have a couple of other clinics as well, helping local business people, entrepreneurs start up their own businesses, not-for-profits. We have a mediation clinic, and we've had a tax clinic up until the last little bit of time here. So, I've assisted the economic justice clinic with casework, given my background, and working with students who then are working directly with people in the local community that need legal help and can't afford it. So that's where I've spent the most of my time. And that's really great. Again, just kind of drawing upon the student experience. When you do that in law school, it really kind of reminds you why you went to law school in terms of being able to make a difference. And that energy, the student energy that they bring to problems, and their willingness and desire to kind of make a difference is really, that's great to be around, right? And so, Kevin may be able to speak to this as well, but when you're in private practice, that energy and that kind of that desire to make a difference isn't always as strong as you see when you're with students and young lawyers. And so I've really enjoyed that. Unfortunately for us, Professor Fox is going to be retiring in the fall. And so I'll be doing more work directly with an eviction clinic starting this fall. And again, just trying to continue the good work that others before us have done. But I think that's really a chance. 90% of landlords have lawyers, and statistically, and 90% of tenants don't. And so providing those resources to people, so at least the issues can be heard in kind of a fair way, I think is really, I'm looking forward to that, doing more and more of that coming up here in the fall. So.
Evan, you mentioned in your answer just now that You talked about how it might be long stretches of time when you're not in court, for example. And I think, most people who aren't lawyers think of what lawyers do, and they think of going to court every day, and it's very different from what life as a lawyer is really like. So maybe if each of you could share what you think is a common misconception about working as a lawyer and one who serves the community in the way that you do.
Oh,
And
God.
anyone can jump in first there.
I would like to go last.
Oh, I think you're onto something there, Vinny. I think everyone kind of assumes all lawyers go to court all the time, right? I think that's just in that, and that's, if you didn't know otherwise, you would see TV shows and the like, and that's kind of the image that's portrayed, and that really isn't the case. There, even for lawyers that go to court frequently, and that could be, if not daily, a couple times a week, it could be a couple times a month. There's a lot of time outside of court meeting with clients and researching the law, gathering up facts and meeting with other witnesses related to the case where you're not into court very much at all. So doing what we do on the eviction side of things, we might be into court, once or twice a week, but there could be several weeks where we don't go into court. And I guess one other thing before I pass the baton, there are so many different things that lawyers do and so many different types of lawyers, litigation attorneys, transactional attorneys. Transactional attorneys, frankly, might never go to court over the course of their career. Tax lawyers might never go to court. Estate planning lawyers might never go to court. So there's just and I wouldn't have known that before law school. But there are just a number of things you can do with a law degree too, I think is something else that I guess I'll finish on. You give lawyers the floor, Vinny, they might not stop talking, I guess, I'm exhibit A. But even if you go to law school for a law degree, people do any number of things with a law degree outside of the law. And that I've been kind of surprised by that it really does open up a lot of different avenues for you. So that's my plug for law school.
Gosh, well, that's a great question, Vinny. And yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Dave said. Courtroom is a small part of even what litigators do, let alone other attorneys. I guess another common misconception of lawyers is that they're money driven. And I think Notre Dame Law School in particular, and the others on this call are good evidence of the fact that a lot of people, and this is something that Notre Dame really teaches, from day one, is that they train a different kind of lawyer that's not just focused on, being the best or the wealthiest commercial litigator, but it does, have an interest in bettering their community through a variety of ways, some of which involve courtroom work and some of which don't. And so, yeah, I mean, I have been, I would say, just welcome back to Notre Dame with such warm arms from so many that have similar interest to me in in the public interest sphere, wrongful conviction work and otherwise. And it's, lawyers get a bad rap, but there's a lot of public interest lawyers, I think, that let their heart, decide their career path, even at the expense of, making money or losing out on other, opportunities.
Yeah, I came up with kind of something to say, which is I think maybe a lot of people interpret lawyers having a very arm's length, kind of corporate relationship with their clients. And I do think that can be the case if you work at a larger law firm. But I think if you do public interest work, the type of work we do here in our clinics, we have a very personal relationship with our clients, which is kind of going off of what I said before about we're providing hope for our clients while they're wrongfully incarcerated. And that goes everywhere from we want to provide mental health support for them. We want to make sure they're always comfortable, despite their situation. And so I think our lawyering, at least at the Exoneration Justice Clinic, goes beyond just legal representation. Kevin, do you think that's a fair
Oh, yeah.
statement? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jess. I think people do often think of lawyers in that way, and that it's this kind of cold, dispassionate, relationship that exists there. But when you're serving the community in the way that all of you do, it's not really that at all. You're so invested in what's happening, and there are real people on the other side of all of this. Is that difficult to deal with? When you're serving in the roles that all of you served in, is it hard sometimes to manage that emotional side of things, because there are real people here, and the outcomes of the matters that you work on for them are very impactful to their everyday life?
Yeah, I can start. I think secondhand trauma definitely is real in this area. And Kevin actually helped have Stella Miller, who is the law school's therapist, come and talk to the Exoneration Justice Clinic about how we can be mindful to protect our own mental health while we're doing this work, because it can be very emotionally draining to know that while we're out here, our clients are imprisoned every moment of the day.
Yeah, I agree. It can be extremely emotionally difficult doing this sort of work, the kind of work that Jess and I do, or the kind of work that Dave does, for people that are less fortunate than you, especially when, the stakes are so high. If, one of Dave's cases where a client is facing eviction, I mean, the client could literally be homeless, if you don't prevail, or our client could end up, many of our clients have been sentenced to prison for decades. And that is riding on, the work that you do, which can be emotional, it can be stressful, particularly when, for us, it's a long cycle of it being slow, but then when things get to an evidentiary hearing or a trial, it can be very, very intense. And I think, there's really no way around that. And you have to do or be really deliberate about taking good care of yourself mentally, and the other people on your team, providing support for them. And we try to do that every day. I can say also, in addition to being stressful, it is a good motivator. Probably the hardest that I ever worked at the law firm I worked at in Chicago was on a wrongful conviction case where I was completely convinced of my client's innocence, and worked longer and harder on a pro bono case than I ever worked on any of my billable cases. And it literally kept me up at night. And I think it maybe that's not the healthiest thing for me, though. I think it was probably a good thing for the client ultimately. But the answer is yes, it can be stressful and emotional.
Yeah, and I don't have any great words of wisdom too. Just I think Jess and Kevin are right on, right? I mean, we're humans, and we care, right? And we're doing this work because we care, and the type of work that we do, it really is the most important thing in our clients' lives. And so, yeah, the stakes are high, so. I don't know that you ever completely master that. I continue to kind of try to figure out what the best answer is. But I do think one of the things that I like to try to do is try to allow us to take on some of that stress for our clients, because oftentimes they have a million other things going on in their lives, right? I mean, if it's a single parent and they've got to deal with all of this and they've got an eviction hanging over their head, they don't know, they don't understand the legal process. At least let us kind of try to take on the stress for you, so you can do other things and live your life and be there for the people that you love and care for yourself. So it's a stressful occupation, and you are trying to figure out what the right line is, because the flip side is too, you want to be able to provide good legal advice, right? And so the idea that you want to have that advice to best serve your client, where do you draw that line between becoming emotionally kind of over invested in the case versus providing that legal advice? It's a challenge, but it's a good challenge, right? I mean, these issues are why we went to law school, and trying to make a difference for people that we work with.
And Dave, just to piggyback off that briefly, one situation we commonly have is, you have a legal call with a client, and they have other things that are on their mind that aren't the case, and want to talk. They're in prison in our case, and they want to talk about what's their frustrations at the prison, or whatever it might be. That's not necessarily case related, but like we've always viewed our role as not just completely limited to lawyering. Sometimes good lawyering requires being a great listener and supporter in other ways as well. And that I agree with you, Dave. Yeah, it's tough sometimes to find the line between being a good legal advisor and also being an ear or a listen, or a helping hand, or just someone that will sit on the phone every other week and listen to them talk about what they want to talk about. But that's really, I think, makes it rewarding when you have because that's, I think, helps the relationships deepen as well. And I think that's good for everyone, the lawyers and the client, for them to have meaningful relationships.
Yeah, I just to volley back to what you said, Kevin, I think that's exactly right. And I think oftentimes the people that we work with often don't feel like they've been listened to, or their concerns have been validated or considered in a responsible way. And so being able to listen and kind of view their concerns as reasonable and legitimate, and kind of being that sounding board, that oftentimes is the biggest thing that we can often do for clients. We all want to win, and we like to win, and whatever that win looks like. But for so many of the clients that we work with, they don't feel like they've been listened to or heard. So at least for what I do, and I think what you do, listening and really kind of being willing to listen, I think is really something that's valued from the client side of things. So if we can do that, I think it's well worth our time to invest in that type of relationship.
I did have a quick question, if that's all right. Yeah, it was, the community's been reading Just Mercy, and we've also been reading a book called The Sun Does Shine. So it features a story about Anthony Ray Hinton. He's talked about at the very end of Just Mercy. And what I found at all the different events we've been at, by reading the books and hearing different stories of people in our community and some of the challenges they're facing, is kind of this sense of frustration of, why does the system not work like it should sometimes? And I think so that the conversation kind of goes back and forth of, well, what works well, but how do we have so many wrongful convictions? Those types of things start coming up. So I'd be curious, from your perspective, in the work that you've done so far, what are some of the things that you feel our justice system here in the United States gets right? Like, this is really good. Like, this works really well. This is a model for others, versus some areas that we need to work on to ensure that wrongful convictions and those types of things don't happen.
I'm happy to take the first stab at that, because there are plenty of different answers to this. In terms of what we do right, I think there's no question in my mind that, at least as a theoretical matter, the adversarial system of the United States is better than the alternative of like an inquisitorial system. I think the best way to suss out the truth, in theory for sure, is to have passionate advocates on both sides pleading their case, and that is the United States system. But like, the reality on the ground, I think, is that we've failed to live up to that system in a number of ways. I'll just talk about two briefly that I think have led to a lot of the problems, at least problems that we see in the criminal justice system. One, I think, is like a systematic underfunding of public defenders' offices, in a way that the people who are entrusted to represent indigent defendants have far too many cases, far too much on their plate to do a truly effective job of representing their clients. Not enough resources, and in most cases are paid less and have significantly less resources than, a corollary prosecutor's office in the same county. So I think that's, part of the problem there is there's almost this, stacking of the deck against indigent criminal defendants. Some have said that there's a dual track of justice in the country, one track for those who have money and one who don't. And I, subscribe to that view. I think it's, you look at people who have gotten acquitted of very serious crimes and high profile cases where the evidence is 1,000 times stronger than people who have been wrongfully convicted in cases on weaker evidence. So that's one. And then just another one, I think, there's a little bit of a problem on the law enforcement and prosecutorial side of things in our criminal justice system, where there's a little bit of an incentive structure that I think is out of whack. What I mean by that is that I think that there are remote and often not foreseeable consequences of cutting corners to obtain a conviction, whether that be as a police officer. And I don't, subscribe to the view that all police or all prosecutors are bad people. I certainly do not. But I think that an incentive structure has been set up where where there's little cost to cutting corners from a procedural perspective. And it allows people who believe they have the right guy, to cut corners and not face the consequences of their actions until, if at all, far, far down the road. Prosecutors have immunity for most of the types of mistakes that they can make in a criminal trial, and have absolute immunity, I should say, and police officers have qualified immunity that, protects them from any sort of liability, except in the most extreme of circumstances. And then add to that, an environment at many police forces where, and not all, certainly, because there are many that are doing a wonderful job of this, but where discipline is not as serious as it could be, and especially in cases where, the conduct at issue could be sending an innocent person to prison. So, okay, went on longer than I anticipated there, but I'll turn it over to Jessa and Dave.
I can talk about something very specific here, which is the conviction integrity unit, since I'm going to work in one after graduation. I think they're definitely a more recent development in the last, I think, like 10 years, and especially in the last few years, they're popping up all over the country. I think as more progressive prosecutors' offices realize how serious the issues of wrongful conviction are in our country. And I think it's just a great way to avoid the adversarial system after the fact, like after a conviction has already been obtained, and give people who have been convicted in that forum an opportunity to have an independent group of prosecutors review that conviction to see if it actually should stand up or not. So I think that's a good backstop to like some of the issues that prosecutors' offices and police departments face. And I think it also helps to acknowledge that public defenders' offices are severely underfunded. I definitely think there's still a serious need for like exoneration clinics and projects, the Innocence Network, all of that. But I think the conviction integrity units are, I guess, a great acknowledgement that sometimes things do go wrong.
So I'll just close. I'll stay away from the criminal side of things because I do most of my work on the civil side of things. But since we're at a library event, I'd encourage listeners to read Evicted if they haven't already. It's a book by Matthew Desmond that I think came out in 2016. And he really kind of followed some families that have been evicted in the Milwaukee area, but was such a powerful writer that really sparked a conversation that's even taking place today about what we can do about the crisis of eviction and the causes of it. And I think really I'd say three things for us to think about in terms of what we want for our community. One is a lack of affordable housing, right? I think all of us can see that for somebody making minimum wage, and they need a 2 or 3 bedroom home, and if they have to pay $1,000 a month for that, that's going to be really difficult, right? And so what kind of policy choices do we want to make housing affordable for the vast majority of people? And I think we've let that slide, creating a real issue for people in our community. I think Indiana is a great place to be. It's a fabulous community, but unfortunately, on the legal side of things, as far as landlord-tenant law, it frankly lags some other places, and it makes it far too easy for landlords to provide substandard housing. But if tenants withhold rent in that situation, most likely they're still going to be evicted. So what do we want that line to look like, and where do we want the thumb on the scale to be? I think is a good conversation for us to have in terms of what we want that relationship to look like. And again, the fact of legal representation. We know that 90% of lawyers nationally have lawyers, and 10% or 90% of tenants have lawyers, right? So there's a great imbalance in terms of who's represented in that process, and it's pretty proven fact based on different studies that people that have lawyers tend to get better outcomes. And so if we want to be serious about trying to make that process as smooth as possible, understanding that eviction can follow somebody for decades and make it difficult for them to get jobs and employment and other housing, do we want to devote some more resources to making that a little bit fairer fight? So those are some long-term questions that ebb and flow, but things that we see locally in our community that I think we need to have further conversations about.
Eric, did you have any additional questions you wanted to pose?
I think maybe one more is kind of lingering for me, because you've all touched on it in different ways. I guess it's a multi-parter. You pick whatever you want. As you've all mentioned, this is very difficult work, and you have to find ways for self-care and making sure that you're in a good place to then help others. So I have questions kind of around the day-to-day. What are some of the things that drain you? Because I think from a career services perspective, personality, your values, your interests, your skill set, all these things kind of come together to make us who we are, and we approach work and life in different ways. And I'm just always curious, day to day, what are the things that drain you, that make it tiring to do this type of work? And what are some of those other things, though, that give you those quick boosts of energy that energize you daily? I've definitely heard kind of those bigger picture, serving others, listening to their stories, but I'm just kind of curious, day to day, what keeps you motivated and energized, and what might, make the work difficult. And then the other part of this, if you want to answer it this way, I'm always kind of curious at those kind of milestone moments for people where something challenging that you did not see coming. Because I can only imagine going into a prison and talking with someone for the first time, how difficult that would be. So I'm curious about the kind of major milestone moments where like, wow, this is going to be challenging, versus those milestone moments of I'm very confident because of this and what I can do. So feel free to answer however you want with that.
I'll take a shot at the first part, I guess. What gives me energy, among other things, is working with really passionate students who are still young and are really the future of our legal system, right? These law students are going to grow up to be in positions of power at prosecutors' offices, at defense attorneys' offices, and at law firms elsewhere, and to see people that are so, idealistic and passionate about justice and about getting things right is really inspiring to me. And that's, like Dave alluded to, that's something, you don't kind of have that idealism, I think, often out in the real world, and working back at a law school, it's, overflowing almost, and it's wonderful and refreshing. So what drains me, I would say, the passage of time can be difficult in our cases, just because it's a slog on, and you have days when you feel like, things aren't moving at all. And you have weeks, frankly, and months even, when things feel like things aren't moving at all. That can be draining sometimes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jessa and Dave.
I can kind of go off what Kevin is saying, since I have limited experience. Like, I am not a lawyer yet, but just like working in the clinic, like Kevin's saying, sometimes you have like months where there's little progress, and it can be really, really draining. But when you get big wins, like when we were able to exonerate Andy Royer last year, that was such a hopeful moment. And I think it provides hope for the rest of our clients. And I guess just on the day to day, even though it can be challenging, like it won't be easy to go see my client in person tomorrow morning, but just knowing that it will improve his day and his immediate future, it's a beam of hope in my life too.
Yeah, I just to finish up on that, I think Kevin's point again is right on point. I think working with students who are so passionate, I think you can't put you're guessing here in terms of the students going to law school for this reason, but it's a high percentage of students are going to law school, at Notre Dame because they want to make a difference in people's lives, and that can take on different roles. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to do public interest work all the time. But it attracts a certain person that really thinks the law can make a difference in people's lives, and how you treat others is critically important, whether you're doing it in public interest or private practice, prosecutor's office. Let's treat others as you would like to be treated. That really is, there's something there, I think, in terms of attracting people to Notre Dame. And that's great to see play out and kind of build upon and see the young lawyers developing the skills that are going to serve them for the next 30, 40 years and the difference that they make. So I think, Kevin, we kind of use working with students, they're kind of we're some of the fingertips, but then they go out and make a difference by the type of work that they do. So that's great. And you also just, the client, you get the feedback from the clients, right? And you can just tell that they're so appreciative of the work that you've done. And it's not necessarily anything that they particularly say, but you can just tell the emotional connection you've had with the client that just makes it all worthwhile. So those are two things that I think really make it a rewarding experience. I think, again, to Kevin's point, the passage of time, it's obviously a little bit different in the type of work that we do, but nothing goes as fast or as quickly as you think it's going to go, right? It's just, somebody will say they'll get back to you tomorrow, but it'll be next Friday. Somebody will say you'll get documents tomorrow, but it'll be 2 months. And so that's hard. You want to get into court next week, but nothing's available for a month. So that can be frustrating. And oftentimes clients get frustrated with that too. But we just kind of have to have faith that ultimately just one foot in front of the other, and ultimately we'll get to the place where we're heard and our positions will be evaluated fairly. But that slog is something I don't think you see in LA law. Everything happens, tomorrow or the next episode. If we could only be that lucky.
Would make
I
for
mentioned
terrible
LA law. Vinnie got the LA law. Younger people probably wouldn't recognize LA law, but it was a law show. So trust me.
Well, let's wrap up then with this. What would each of you say, if you were talking to a young person in the community who's thinking about a way that they could do something with their career that would serve others, that would really make a difference? And what would you say to them as they think about potentially becoming a lawyer?
Just find, this is an unrepresentative panel here because we have 2 from one field and 3 that are all in, a clinical center. But I would say just find, an intersection of what you're passionate about and sorry, I'm drawing a blank on what I was going to say, but find something that you're passionate about in public service, in a way that you want to serve, and run with it, and take a chance on it, even if you're not sure what the end is going to hold if you go down that road. I think it's so important that we have people that fight for what they believe in all sorts of different lines of work, not limited to criminal justice or eviction work, in all sorts of ways you can serve, even serving multi-billion-dollar corporations. There's so many ways that you can serve as an attorney. There really are. And so encourage, young prospective attorneys to find something they're passionate about, and serve in that way.
I could jump in. I again just echo. I think Kevin's again spot on here. Looking back, 25 years now almost, being a lawyer, I haven't regretted the decision at all. I think it is a wonderful opportunity to develop a way of thinking and really can make a difference in a number of different ways. I think for those considering law school and thinking, well, if I go to law school, I have to go to court all the time, and maybe I don't feel comfortable doing that, so I don't want to go to law school. Really, that there are so many paths open to you as a lawyer to kind of do the type of work that can make a difference in the community. So you don't go to court, but you work in developing laws that more fairly and adequately represent the interests of, all sorts of different kinds of people. That doesn't require going to court, but can make a substantial difference in the lives of people in our community. So I really do think it is a profession, if you are interested in making a difference for people in your community, it really is one of the top professions that you could choose to allow you to make that type of difference. So I say go for it.
Yeah, I mean, again, in my limited perspective, I just think it's a great feeling to be able to be a voice for somebody who otherwise wouldn't have somebody to, I guess, represent them or speak for them. And that's something I'm looking forward to doing after graduation.
All right. Well, thank you all. This has been wonderful. Thank you for the work that you're doing, the impactful work that you do, and for what you've shared with us this evening. All of the insight. We really appreciate the time and are grateful to you for it.
Yep, and I want to echo that as well, Vinnie. Thank you so much. First and foremost, for the work that you do in our community. Just the stories, I can hear the passion in your voices when you talk about these cases and these people that you're serving and impacting. So thank you for what you do. And thank you for joining us tonight for our one book series. It's really means a lot to me and the whole library staff and community.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it. Thank you, Vinnie.
Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
night.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks, Vinnie.
Have a good night, Eric.
Yeah, you too, bud. Take care.
Yep. Bye.